Okay, welcome back. Now in these next two videos we're going to be looking at flash photography. Now this is really going to be an introduction. I'm not going to be able to go through all aspects of flash photography because it's quite a big subject, and there's entire courses that are just based on flash photography. But what I want to do is just give you an introduction, give you some of the main scenarios that you'd want to use flash. And in the second video I'm going to talk a little bit about diffusers, which is one of my preferred methods of using flash. Now essentially there's three particular scenarios that you want to use flash. One, the obvious one, is when there's not enough light at all and you actually need to add light in your scene. So if you remember with the photo triangle, we have the light corner down the bottom left hand corner, and we've dealt with exposure values like aperture, shutter speed and ISO, which go into those light values, and we've also looked at white balance, which is to do with the color in that light corner. And flash is another way of actually adding light, so that also goes and feeds into exposure. It's a way of adding light to your scene where there's not enough light. So the first scenario is adding light to a scene that doesn't have enough light already. The second scenario, which people know about a little less, is fill flash. And what fill flash is useful for is if you have a scene, like here I have this scene with this statue of an owl, and there's a lot of light coming from kind of the back corner, from the side into the back, but the front of the owl is not very well exposed. So I'm going to show you how that works in this particular scenario. But fill flash is great if you have outside light that's a little strong and there's shadows that you want to balance out. So you have a strong light source and the other side there's kind of too much shadow, so great for portrait photography where you actually want to reintroduce some light. One way is to actually use a reflector, which I'll show you a little bit more about in the portrait videos in the gold members area. But a flash is a useful tool too to just fill in that dark shadows. And the other benefit too of fill light is sometimes in a scene, like if you're taking photographs of someone under trees or something where there's a lot of the green light coming down, sometimes it's really hard to get the right white balance in that situation. Whereas flash light is very close to sunlight, so you're going to get a much better color balance if you use that flash to fill in. So it'll take away that green cast that you quite often get under trees and close to vegetation. So really a good way to just bring in some better light saturation into your scene. And the third use for flash is to actually freeze motion. One thing about a quick flash from these flash units, whether it's on the camera, a pop-up flash, or it's a dedicated flash unit, the light that pulses out is really quick. So for instance, on your camera you may only be able to go up to 4,000th of a second or 8,000th with the more pro models, but a flash burst can be like in the range of 10,000th of a second. So in a scene where the ambient light's quite dark and you want to like freeze the motion of something, the flash is really useful for that because it's really a quick burst of light. So even if there's some ambient light in the scene, you can actually shut down that ambient light a bit by shrinking your aperture and making the scene darker, and then using that flash to actually freeze the motion of your subject. So I'll go into that as well. So we'll go through those three scenarios, which is the most common uses of flash photography. Okay, now it's getting really dark and we're getting kind of an interesting sky in the background. We've got a sunset starting to happen. So now we're in a situation where the light is really too dark to get photos with the camera at a decent shutter speed. So this is the time where we want to introduce more light. So what I'm going to do first is take a shot of our little model Deanie here without a flash and just show you what's going to happen here. Okay, can you stand up, Missy? Okay, so obviously it's trying to expose and we're seeing blurring from the shutter speed being way too slow, so it's not going to work in this light to just take it without a flash. So now we'll pop up that flash and we'll take another shot. And that's great. And we're getting some of the background lighting in there, so that gives you some idea. So, but we're also getting quite a slow shutter speed. Now what I like to do in these situations is actually go manual. Okay, so what we'll do is we're going to aim it at the sky in the background. And I'm just going to put a third of the stop below the background lighting, because I want to make it a little bit more dramatic, that background lighting. Let's get a little bit lower here. Okay, that's better. Okay, just natural smile, so happy to eat the berries. There we go. So there we go, so that's giving you more of an idea. Just a third of a stop is giving that much more of that sky color in the background. So that's looking a lot better. And then Deanie's quite well exposed. So this is really an example of using pop-up flash and straightforward shooting at the subject. So you'll notice that it's fairly flat lighting because we're aiming straight. The flash is fairly close to the lens, so the light is really hitting straight from the camera's perspective. So we're having fairly flat light. So let's try it with the external flash. Now the beauty of the external flash is we've got a lot more power, so we can actually stand further back. So the thing with these pop-up flashes, they don't have the same power as an external dedicated flash. So you have to be kind of within 10 feet away of your subject to get a reasonable shot. Whereas if you use the dedicated flash, you can be almost triple that distance. So that lets you actually stand further back and use a telephoto. So now with a telephoto on the camera, you can actually get those nice sort of portrait shots where you zoom in on your subject with a nice shallow depth of field. And so that dedicated flash unit will let you stand further back and zoom in with those shots and still have plenty of light. So I'll show you how that works right now. Okay, here we go, we have the telephoto lens now, and let's try that with zooming in. Can you stand up this just for a minute so I can get the sky in the background, please? Okay, that's a little better. And what we can do here too is we can go into our quick menu, and there's a flash compensation here. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to set it to through the lens, and then I'm going to set flash compensation. We'll take it down a couple of stops and try that out. So let's try down with a couple of stops down. There we go, so we're looking a bit more normal there. So I'm going to just pull it up just a fraction. So we'll go to just one stop. So we're just doing flash compensation, just one stop down. There we go, that's looking nice. So what I'm going to show you first is just with a pop-up flash. These pop-up flashes are useful for close distances, say up to like 10 feet, but not really useful for anything beyond that. But in our case, we're fairly close. And I'm just going to use aperture priority. So it's going to force it to be 2/50th of a second because that's my flash sync. And we'll just get a fill shot here to show you what I'm talking about. I'll get a nice low angle. Okay, so that's our flash shot. So I'm going to show you without a flash. Okay, so that's without a flash. So what we're seeing here with this image is we're seeing the sky, and it's lost a lot of detail in the sky, and it's trying to expose for the owl, but you kind of got a lot of shadow detail in the bright highlights, so you're missing something in between there. And now I'll take a shot of the owl with the flash, pop-up flash. Okay, so you can see the pop-up flash has really filled in some of that color. So we're going to be seeing a lot more of the wood detail on the front of the owl here that's in shadow. But now the other trick is you'll see the sky is not a lot better. So what I tend to do with flash, instead of auto exposing, I set it to manual exposure. And what I do then is I'll actually point at the sky and I'll put it like a couple of stops too low. So let's make sure our ISO is on as low as we can get, which is 100, because I want to be able to have a slow enough shutter speed here. So what we have to do now to get 2/50th of a second is I have to shut down that aperture all the way to f/22. And what I want to do is I'm actually going to underexpose the sky by 1 stop just to show you that effect. So this is what will happen without the flash, underexposed by 1 stop. Okay, obviously way too dark. So if I pop the external flash on now, we're going to just underexpose the sky by 1/3 or 2/3 of a stop. And try that. Okay, so there we go. We're getting a much more interesting look now. We've got the owl lit up, and we've got this sky looking more dramatic because we haven't overexposed it. So that gives you an idea how you can actually get that sky looking the right color. Because a lot of people have problems. They use fill flash during the day, and they've got maybe a nice blue sky in the background, or even like sunset, and they wonder why it just grays out or whites out the background. They lose all the detail, and that's usually because it gets blown out. So if you meter for the background, get a reading on that, especially with manual exposure, and you just take it to 1 or 2/3 of a stop underexposed, so we know the sky is going to have plenty of detail, it's not going to blow out, and then you leave it on that setting in manual, and then you focus on your subject, and then you can get a nice detailed background sky close to the correct exposure, but also getting some correct exposure on your subject as well. So that's great for a lot of portrait shots too, and weddings and things like that, where you just want to fill in the subject so you don't get harsh shadows, which is not very flattering. So we're here on the quartz, and I'm going to show you that freezing power of the flash, because the flashlight is so quick, the strobe's so quick, that we can actually use it to freeze action. So I'm going to take some tennis shots here, and we're going to see how much we can actually freeze it. So normally in these light conditions, it's getting quite dark, we would be using a really slow shutter speed. And in this case, with the flash, we can get much faster than we would be able to if we were just taking it without a flash. So we'll show you that effect right now. So what I'm going to do too is I'm actually going to pre-focus and then flip it over to manual, because I don't want to have the autofocus hunting in this kind of light condition, hunting for focus, because that's going to slow it down, and I want to be able to have an instant shot as quick as I can. And we're on through the lens mode here, so the flash is actually using a reading through the lens to get the right exposure. So we're going to go manual exposure, because if I set it to these conditions, it's going to set it to a really slow shutter speed. So I really just want to set it to the flash sync speed in this particular flash of around 2/50th of a second. So we're not going to try and include any background ambient light here. We're just going to go, actually 200th of a second will be fine for this. And then I'm going to set the aperture to quite big, just to try to let a lot of light in. So we've got 2.8 here. Okay, I'm just going to take a test shot first. Okay, there we go. So that's what we want. We want the background totally black. We just want to really isolate the subject in this case. Okay, let's try a surf shot. Okay, so a little late there. So now I'll take a few shots here and just try to get that timing right. The ball's higher than I expected, really. That was better. We'll just get a few more till we get it right. Well, that was close. Whoa. It seemed close. It's like just before or just after. Okay, just a fraction too slow there. Really difficult, not easy getting the perfect timing here. But oh, that was not bad. That was not bad. So we pretty much got ball contact on that one. So what I'm going to do now quickly is I'm just going to show you there's a thing where you can sync it before. You can either sync it with the first curtain it's where the flash just shoots and then the shutter stays open a little bit and then closes. Or you can shoot second curtain, which is the shutter opens and then just before it closes it flashes. So that way we can actually, if there's any motion blur with the longer shutter speed, with second curtain what happens is you have the movement, you get a blur of movement, and then it freezes just before the shutter closes, which is more natural. So you have the motion, object frozen with the blur after the movement. If you go first shutter, it's the other way around, where you'll actually have a blur before your moving object, which doesn't quite look natural. So I'm going to set that in the menu quicker for second curtain there. Okay, shutter curtain. So here we go, we're going to custom function in this particular camera, shutter curtain, and the shutter curtain sync. And we can either choose second curtain or first curtain. So here we go, we're going to set it to second curtain. And now I'm going to set the actual shutter speed a little lower, so we get some kind of motion blur happening in the background. So we'll actually set it quite slow to like a 20th of a second. So we're going to see some kind of blurred motion and then the frozen flash shot. Okay, let's get a couple of shots like that. Okay, hang on, let me just get a lock on focus first. Okay. Oh, that was close though, that was close. That must have been close. Yeah, that was pretty close. Okay, great. So that wraps that up. Okay, we're going to do a little experiment now. I was talking about how flash can freeze motion, and I've got a little set here, and what we're going to do is we have that water there that I've put some food colouring in, so we have a nice red water there, and I've set up my camera here, and what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to, although this pop-up flash is popped up here, I've actually set it in the menus to fire an external flash. This particular model, which is the 60D, Canon 60D, actually allows you to go into the flash control menu, and you can actually set it to fire an external flash. So what you do is you go into the flash menu, and under the built-in flash menu there, you can actually set it to wireless function. So basically I'm using the wireless mode, and I'm setting it to just fire the external flash. So what I've done is I've actually set up a scene here with the flash back there. I actually have it on an old camera because I wanted it really low to the floor and I didn't have a stand that was low enough. So I have the flash there, so it's going to shoot light from that angle, so slightly from behind. And then I have a little reflector over there, so that's going to pull some light backwards. So we're going to get a bit of light from both angles coming from behind. And I've actually set it to manual exposure here. So we've got 1/25th of a second. So I've really made it, I've actually set it so that when I take a photo straight out, it doesn't actually light up the background enough. So there we go, I'm just having it so it shoots off a frame, so it's totally black. So the shutter speed of 1/25th of a second and aperture f9, and we're on 1/60th ASA, those are really not good enough for this lighting situation. So it's too dark to even show anything without a flash, so, which is what I want, because I actually want a pitch black background for this particular shot. So what we do is we pop up the flash, and I'll just show you a test shot. What I'm using is I'm using that self timer, so when I press the button, clicks away, and there we go. So we can actually see our subject there now, which is the bowl. Yeah. So basically I want a really dark shot with just the bowl showing, and that's working for me. So now what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to set it to 10 seconds, and I'm going to drop some items in the water so that you can see the effect. so that you can see the effect of the flash freezing motion. So here we go, we're going to go into drive mode and I'm going to set it to 10 seconds. So that'll give me time to drop some items in there. And I'm also going to just darken this a little bit, so I'm going to switch off a light here. It's going to get a little darker. Just so I'm going to minimize. So I'm minimizing the ambient light too, so it's really just the flash effect coming into play here. And so here we go. Great. So nice little splash shot. Cool. So the cool thing about the flash countdown, it does that first 9 seconds or so and then does it real quick timing just before it actually takes a shot. So it lets you know that it's about to fire, so it's really handy. So let me do a couple more of those. That was pretty neat. This time I'm going to drop an acorn in. Single acorn. Okay, that was a little soon. Let's try that again. So it is a bit of trial and error with this kind of thing. You want to get the timing right. Okay, so we've probably got an acorn in the midair there. Let's do that again. Okay, too soon. Try that again. Okay, just get a few more shots. That was a nice one. Okay, that was a great one. Yeah, so it really gives you that idea of splashdown. Cool. Great. Okay, now I'm just going to set up another thing. I'm going to pause it there. Let's get some more light on the scene. Okay, so I'm going to pause it there and I'm going to change the orientation of my camera so that we have a portrait shot, and I'm going to put a glass there. And we'll drop some things into just a glass so we have more of a portrait shot. So that should look interesting too. Okay, so let me get that set up. Okay, so we've got part 2 here. We're going to try it now with a little glass of water with some green dye in it to see how that comes out. Okay, so I'm going to switch off our main light again and make things nice and dark there. And let's try the red ball first. Cool. Nice. Quite a radical one, that one. Okay, let's try a couple others. Try with an acorn. Okay, a lot of splash with the water here. Let's see how that looks. Not bad. So you can see you can get some really fun shots using flash to freeze motion of different things, and much more effectively than using a fast shutter speed. And the reason being is you're introducing light concentrated on one area, so you can just freeze it. So if I was to use a fast shutter speed, for one, I wouldn't be able to use a fast shutter speed in this situation because it's really not enough light. And if you are in a situation where you can use a really fast shutter speed, it's quite hard to get a dark enough background so that what you want frozen in the foreground is not sort of competing with the background. Whereas in this situation here, we can like aim the light the way we want it, which is really one of the benefits of flash too, so that we're not lighting up the back. And of course I'm putting black cloth there as well, which is making it a lot darker too. But if I was to just shoot with a onboard flash in this situation, I'll show you what that would do. So I'm going to switch our external flash off here, and if I go into the menu quick and put the flash setting so that it's disabled the wireless function. Now if we go into, now if I shoot and we take a shot, see what happens now if we use the pop-up flash, we can light our subject, but because we're getting a lot of flash in that direction, we're actually lighting up the background, which is starting to look grey now, so, rather than pitch black like we like. So that's really the benefit of pulling the flash off the camera. You can really get the light where you want. And so that wraps up this session about using flash to freeze objects. So I hope that gave you some inspiration to go try out some flash work yourself using flash to freeze. And also really to think about whether you'd want to actually get an external flash to be able to experiment a little bit more, because the pop-up flashes are a little bit limited in this area. That kind of sums it up. Okay, so thank you for listening.